In this lesson, we'll work on setting up the lighting for our aircraft scene. Okay, so in our previous lesson, we worked on setting up the photographic background for this scene. Now we need to work on making the lighting look a little bit more natural, a little bit more realistic, something that matches the rest of the environment. Now, if we have some sort of a photographic environment like this connected up, here's a quick and easy way of setting up lighting that is going to be based on that environment. So we're going to do this with the help of a skylight. So I'm going to come in here and switch to a 4-panel view. There we go. And I'll go to something like my top view. Now let's go and create our lights. We're going to go to the standard lights and we're going to look for this skylight. So let's come in here. We can click. It really doesn't matter where in the scene we place our skylight, just that we place it somewhere that's maybe easy to reach. Whenever we're done, just right click to exit out of our light creation mode. So this skylight, if we come in and take a look at the parameters for that, very, very simple light in that has an on-off switch, and right now it is set to use a sky color. Now, if we come in here, and if I press the C key on my keyboard and switch to my camera view, let's actually try that. We'll go to the shot cam. There we go. Let's come in and just take a quick render of this as it exists right now. Okay, so you can sort of see where it's providing this surrounding illumination, sort of all-encompassing, and right now it's just using this flat white color. Now we could do that, but what we could also do is tell it to use the scene environment. So now it's actually going to base the skylight's color on the environment that we have plugged in here. Now if we come back and render this, you can see this is going to start looking quite a bit more realistic. Now if I needed this light to be a bit stronger, I could always come in. Let's just take our light multiplier and bump that up from 1 to maybe something a little bit higher like 3. There we go. Now we're actually starting to get some light that is a little bit more realistic and, again, a bit more closely based on our real-world lighting. We can continue to take this up a little bit higher if we need to. Now we probably won't use this as our only light source. What I usually like to do is to come in and bump that up, or just sort of use additional light sources, I guess you could say, to boost that. Now, right now, before I start to move on to my second light source, one of the things you will notice is that while we do have some nice lighting, the shadows are really not very strong. Now, whenever rendering with mental ray, which is what we're doing now, if we start to introduce this skylight, typically it won't have very great contact shadows. And that has to do with this final gather precision. Right now, by default, it's going to be set to a draft. Now, if we come in and take my final gather and bring that all the way down, you can see it actually completely destroys the effect of the light. So we do need to have some kind of final gather in here. Now, final gather is really just a secondary or an indirect illumination method. If you want to learn more about that, you can take a look at our Introduction to Mental Ray course to learn a little bit more about this. But for now, just suffice to say that it is an indirect illumination method, or a method for calculating indirect illumination. And if we want to start to increase the quality of our shadows for this skylight, we're going to need to take our final gather precision and start to bump this up. Now be aware that as you start to increase this precision, it will also pretty dramatically increase your render time, so definitely use this effect wisely. Okay, so that's starting to look a little bit better. Now what I'd like to do is come in and add in another light source that can maybe help mimic this sunlight back here. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'll do is switch to my top view once again. Let's go in and create a light. In my case, I'll use something like this Target Direct. Remember from one of our earlier lessons, whenever we talked about the different light types, the direct light's going to be really, really good for sunlight. By dropping in one light source, we can create light for an entire scene. So let's come in here. And once again, I'll just click once wherever we want the light to begin. And without letting off my mouse, we'll drag to where we want the light to be pointed. Once I'm done, just right-click to exit out of light creation mode. And there we go. And once again, in this view, I may need to come in and make sure my viewport background is set to environment background. There we go. And now, I'll just take my direct light and sort of move this up and down until it's pointed roughly in the same area as the sun. Doesn't have to be precise, doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, just as long as it's relatively close. Okay, so I think that will work out pretty well. Now, let's come in to our light. Let's make sure that we do have shadows enabled on this. And go ahead and maybe give this some ray trace shadows. Now, one of the things to remember whenever using something like this direct light is we do have this little area of influence, this sort of a cone. This is very similar to the cone that we would see on a spotlight. So what that means is that anything that falls outside of this cone won't receive any illumination. So let's go to that directional parameters for this light. Let's take the hot spot in the beam, and let's really open this up so that way it can be sure to encompass everything that I need. And pull back in my top view and make sure that this is going to stay in my scene. There we go. So I think that will work out just fine. We can maybe open that up a little bit more if we need to. There we go. So let's see what that's done for us. Let's come in and take a quick render. Oops, let's make sure that we are actually rendering from the correct view. Let's go ahead and make sure that that is our active view. What I'll do is go ahead and take this, set it to quad 4 shot cam, and just lock that down. So that way I don't have to constantly remember to be in the proper view. With that lock enabled, it will always render from that view. There we go. So now we have some pretty nice lighting that is coming from our environment, and also some nice shadows that are coming from this sunlight back here. Now, there are probably still a few things that we could do to this as far as increasing the realism of this object. One of the things that we could do is go in and start to make some changes to the materials themselves that will actually make it a little bit more realistic as far as the rendering is concerned. So we'll talk about some of these material changes that we can start to make in our next lesson.